Welcome, I'm Deb Brinkman with the League of Women Voters, St. Louis Park. The League of Women Voters is a trusted grassroots organization whose members do the hands-on work to safeguard democracy. While we never endorse or support or oppose a candidate, we are directly involved in shaping important issues to keep our community strong. As a League member, I have the opportunity to work on issues that have great impact on state, local, and even national issues. If you're interested in learning about how you can make a similar impact, I encourage you to pick up some of the League's membership information back on the table. There's a blue slip here and a Join the League pamphlet here. Tonight, we'll start with a 2-minute opening statement, and the opening statements will start in order that the candidates are sitting from left to right. The candidates will be answering questions, written questions, and if you have a question you'd like to ask the candidates, please write it down on an index card and put it back in the basket on the table in back there. And then, so we'll be reading the questions, and we will be rotating as we answer the questions as well. And then we'll have a 2-minute closing. And tonight's candidate forum is being taped, and it will be rerun, or it will run on several different times, and they're noted up on the board behind me. If you'll take a moment to turn your cell phones off or turn them to silent, we'll go ahead and get started. And our first, one more question and one more thing to note. If you've got any questions about the policies are in the pamphlet marked general election. And that is back on the table as well. Okay, why don't we can get started with opening statements. And so I want to again welcome Liz Paulson, John Lesh, Alice Hausman, and John Heyer. Liz, would you like to start with your opening remarks?
Certainly. Since 1977, I've been involved in some aspect of health and human services and education. I'm a licensed school teacher, and I've taught in regular and special education, early childhood, and I've run my own home daycare center, as well as been a professional reading tutor for profits and nonprofit, and for nonprofit schools and public schools. Currently, I'm a professional reading tutor at the Eastside Learning Center. I've also run my own small business, training parents, professionals, and students in some of the skills that we need to succeed in our society. Now, during that time, that's been my passion. And as I'm an American Indian and white citizen, and I've watched my community become more and more dependent and less empowered. And unfortunately, this is not an uncommon state of events. So while we've poured money in, literally billions of dollars added just within the last year, we have seen a flatline trajectory. And the same programs that promised us a great society are the ones that we're using in our state. Even while there is school choice and nonprofit providers and other methods being used in other states. Now, in special education, you jump off a bandwagon if it's not working, and you try other methods and you add in a new team member. And so what I'm saying is we need to add in new team members to this. We need to have American Indians, we need to have multi-ethnic Americans, teachers, and mothers. So I'd like you to vote for me on November 4th, so that we can add more and empower more citizens to create the kind of society we really need and to come up with some new ideas.
Thank you, Liz. Next, we'll go to John Lesh, also running for a seat in 66B.
Hi, thank you, Deb. My name is John Lesh. I've represented District 66B, formerly 66A, but they switched, for 12 years now, 6 terms. I am a father. I have a 13-year-old daughter, and I'm married to Melissa, sitting right back there. I chair the Civil Law Committee in the Minnesota House of Representatives. I've also served on taxes for 10 years, state government finance, I serve on Public Safety, Finance, Judiciary, and Rules Committee currently in my current term. I am a prosecutor for the City of St. Paul. I've been a prosecutor for 14 years. I prosecute domestic assaults. I prosecute neighborhood livability crimes. I also am a small business owner in that I do commercial and residential property management and development. I feel very glad to be running again. I'm glad to have Liz participating in this debate. It's been a long time since I've had one. And very briefly, since I don't have a lot of time in introduction, I'm very proud of the fact that we were able to take a $600 million deficit and turn it into a surplus. I'm very proud that we were able to pay off the school shift, something that was irresponsible for us to do in the first place. I'm glad that we passed marriage equality, that we passed a Safe and Supportive Schools Act to make sure our kids are safe in school. I'm also feel very lucky to have been the chief author of the Puppy and Kitten Mill Breeder Bill to make sure that our family pets have a better opportunity to be raised in healthy circumstances, as well as the Timber J Bill ensuring data privacy as well as public availability of government data.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Alice, for 66A.
Thank you very much to the League of Women Voters for, again, sponsoring this debate. We are fortunate that you put the time in for this exercise in civic engagement, and thank you all for being here. Because I chair the Capital Investment Committee and write the bonding bill, I pay a lot of attention to what Fitch and Moody's and Standard & Poor's say about the condition of our state, and they all pretty much agree. Our strength consistently is that we have a diverse economy. That is, we don't depend on just one industry, and should that industry go belly up, we're then in bad economic times. Instead, we have a rich diversity of economic health and growth in this state. Here's what they worried about for a few years as they watched us. And interestingly, it was during the period of time when people who would label themselves fiscal conservatives were in charge. We have to balance our budget, and if you don't want to bring in new revenue and the economy is bad, what happens? And we started some bad habits. We borrowed against future revenue, the tobacco securitization bonds. We said, well, we won that suit there, that money is coming in, we'll borrow against it for one time to balance the budget. Then, as John said, we shifted onto the schools. We said, we'll pay you next year. Of course, that meant the schools had to borrow to pay their bills that year and pay interest. So in the last 2 years, literally, we have broken those bad habits. We've turned that around. We've repaid the schools. We've started to put some money in the savings account for a rainy day. And I think now it is a matter of setting priorities in terms of where we go in the next couple of years as the economy continues to rebound.
Thank you very much. John Heyer.
Hi, I'm John Heyer. I've been a Republican activist for about 10 years in this area. I'm a recently retired religious educator. I've worked operating religious education programs in a variety of churches in the metropolitan area over the past 30 years, really. And I'm running because of my children and grandchildren. I see what we're doing, and I see what we're spending, and I see where taxes are going in our state, and I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned that they are going to be really put under the gun in terms of paying off their student loan debt, being able to buy houses, just the amount of money that they have to put into the government to get all of the things that the government is providing for them. I think we need to really control our spending so that our taxes aren't as high as they have been. Our top tax brackets are the third highest in corporate income tax or corporate taxes in the entire country out of all 50 states. And our state taxes for income tax, the top bracket is the fourth highest of all states in the nation. And that can't be allowed to continue. We don't want to strive to be number one there. So that's why I'm running.
Thank you very much, John. Okay, we will start with our questions. Again, we will be rotating who's going to go first. All candidates will answer the same question. So the first question is going to go to Alice. What should the legislature do to improve the state healthcare policies and programs?
Healthcare policies and programs, are you talking specifically about the current healthcare reform that we're under, or more broadly?
I think you could interpret that either way, yes.
We've certainly had a lot of attention on that particular issue, and I think everyone is clear that we are still in a process of slow reform. Why did we have to do it? Every other industrialized nation provides healthcare for everyone at half the cost. Something is wrong with our system and the costs that we need to hold down, and none of the reforms in the past have gotten through the process. This finally did. It's the only one we have right now. In Minnesota, we do have the opportunity for some flexibility, and in the year 2017, states can innovate. And I'm hoping that Senator Marty's Minnesota Health Plan, that does in fact insure everyone and provides health care for everyone so that we don't do expensive emergency room care, that we focus more on preventive care, might be at that particular point an innovation that Minnesota can move toward. I think we have to probably take a little bit of the power away from the insurance companies. Right now, they are sort of in the driver's seat.
Thank you, Alice. Liz, would you like me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
What should the legislature do to improve the state health care policies and programs?
I would advise you to look up some of the policies and recommendations put forth by Citizens for Healthcare Freedom. We had a wonderful system in place with suggestions on how to increase it at a significant savings over what we've spent. And it would have enabled us to continue expanding that, ensuring more people. Now, I've heard from a lot of local people on the east side, and they've said that this program has not helped them, that the premiums are so high that they cannot insure themselves, and I've seen young families floundering. So this is not an improvement. Instead, it's a further elimination of some of the freedoms and expansion of government costs. I would really recommend us reevaluating what worked before and possibly look at ways in which we can disengage ourselves from the federal government in this.
Thank you, Liz. John Heyer.
In Minnesota, we have decided to come up with our own healthcare exchange, MNsure. And we are required to either be part of the federal system or be part of our own state system. We have a choice. We chose to do that because we had really good healthcare, really good programs, good prices in Minnesota. Unfortunately, it sort of backfired a little bit because I think a big factor is we hired a bunch of people to run the healthcare exchange that had no experience running a healthcare system before. When you hire amateurs to do a job you need professionals in, they're going to do an amateur job. You're going to have a balky website that no one can navigate. You're going to have 3 months to, when you have a baby, it's going to take you 3 months to add the baby to your policy, and that is just absolutely wrong. We need to have professionals running the system. We need to try to eliminate costs a little bit. Nationally, I think one of the key issues is tort reform. We have money going to lawyers. Sorry. We have money going to lawyers instead of the doctors and the people providing the health care.
Thank you, John. John Lesh.
Okay, a lot to say here. Number one, tort reform is absolutely not the problem. In fact, tort reform nationally accounts for less than 2% of the increase of healthcare costs. Furthermore, in Minnesota, we have the lowest malpractice premiums in the nation. So even if you ask anyone on the opposite side of me in this, the doctors in Minnesota, they'll say tort reform is not the issue in Minnesota. Another state, maybe, but not in Minnesota. I'm a supporter, to answer the question, of Senator Marty's Minnesota Health Plan. It's a better system that we need. Right now, we're funneling double the costs, as Representative Hausman said, into people that do not provide your actual health care. We need health care in this country, not health insurance. But for one thing that Minnesota absolutely does need to do is take an accounting, an audit of the $8 billion in Medicaid funding that goes out every year to the HMOs in Minnesota for whom we cannot audit. It's an outrage. It is outrageous. And it's been going on. In fact, there's a federal investigation that occurred in 2012 and it's ongoing. That's your money. That's your taxpayer dollars that is going toward the $8 billion a year that we're paying for, that right now the HMOs are saying, well, we can't tell you how much that aspirin costs. We can't tell you how much that heart surgery costs and really what it should cost for the better value of your taxpayer dollar, because we can't audit it. That's wrong and that needs to change.
Thank you, John. Okay, our next question, we'll start with John Heyer. Are there any changes you would like to see in Minnesota's immigration policy?
I can address that in a different way than a lot of people can. The last church I worked at for about 13 years, we had 700 Latino families. We had 300 and change African families and a number of Vietnamese families as well. Not all of the Latino families were documented. I know that for a fact. You can tell because when they pay for everything in cash and they don't have checking accounts or credit cards, it's usually a tip-off. We need to have a pathway to citizenship for these people. Clearly, that's an urgent need. We need to be able to get them, because they're working hard, they all have jobs. They are absolutely wonderful people. And they need to, if they can pass a criminal background check, we need to have them have a pathway to citizenship that is smooth and efficient. I think that's a need that we have to address. And I'm a little bit contrary to my party in that. A lot of people say, throw them all out. You can't do that. We need those people. We need their talents and skills in the workforce. So we need a pathway to citizenship.
Thank you. Then the same question, John Lesh.
Thank you. I agree with John on this one. There's no question a path to citizenship is necessary. Now, on the state level, there's certain limitations about what we can do with respect to immigration overall. We can provide immigrants still the same opportunities as the immigrants of my generation have, as the immigrants of my grandparents' generation, as the immigrants of my great-great-grandparents' generation. They should all have the same opportunities, and it seems like recently that pipeline has been restricted. Now it's hang on a second, we climbed up the tree with the rope ladder, we're pulling up after us. You can't do that. This is the shot. Immigrants are the shot in the arm that America needs. They're ensuring we have taxpayer businesses on Rice Street, and on Payne Avenue, and Arcade Street. But for immigrants, we would not have those being taxpayer business. But for immigrants, our schools would be consolidating, mostly like they are in greater Minnesota and other districts, and we would be losing teachers, we would be losing enrollment. They're absolutely exactly what we need, but they should also have the same opportunity to pay the same tuition as Minnesotans. If they've been living here their entire lives and paying taxes their entire lives, sales taxes, income taxes, and property taxes, they should have the same opportunity to attend the University of Minnesota as well as other colleges in the state of Minnesota as kids who supposedly everyone else thinks they were born here. But they're a part of America, and we need to reflect that.
Thank you. Liz?
Hi. I'm one of the charter members of an organization called the Minnesota Liberty Alliance, started by Dan Severson. It's an organization that helps multi-ethnic Americans, mostly new immigrants, learn more about our system and empowers them to become active citizens. And as a member of MLA, I do agree that we need to have the same opportunities, and we do need to have a pathway to citizenship. people in our House district, especially here on the east side, say that again and again. These are young people who want it and need it. But at the same time, they do not want us to make it too easy. They do not want us to have a porous border. And they do want us to reconsider responsible ways of guaranteeing them citizenship. So I say we go to the people. Instead of just having it be a closet discussion that takes place in St. Paul, let's talk to people across the political continuum who come from multi-ethnic nations, and let's let them help us in a responsible fashion to ensure that they have all the rights, privileges, and responsibilities that they so greatly desire.
Thank you, Liz. Alice.
Of course, most of this is national policy. I think the two issues that have come to us are the DREAM Act. All of these kids who went to grade school here, they went to high school here, and then they were going to go to college, and suddenly they were told they would have to pay out-of-state tuition, even though they had lived here their whole life. They had been brought maybe when they were 1 year old. And so that's been an issue that case has been pressed and made fairly clear. The other one is should local law enforcement be enforce immigration policy? Should they also become the enforcers of immigration policy? Law enforcement has, at least in Minneapolis and St. Paul, they would have had the larger numbers, have been consistently opposed to that. There would be all sorts of practical problems with that. And we've had discussions at the state. There have been bills introduced. Sometimes there has been a tendency on the part of the state to want to micromanage to those cities. But I think they've been fairly consistent in stating their case about the impracticality of that.
Thank you very much. Okay, the next question. We'll start with John Lesh. What is your plan to save private sector jobs in Minnesota?
Number one, there are 3 ways that you increase the opportunity for private sector jobs in any state, in Minnesota especially. Infrastructure, higher education in general, but higher education specifically, and R&D. Those are 3 things. Those are 3 ways that the state can invest and ensure that small business owners have a viable workforce and a viable opportunity to ensure that they can grow and offer their unique product to their neighbors in Minnesota, to folks nationally, or even folks internationally. We are not going to compete with the Philippines on who can more cheaply field a call center phone call because you got my credit card bill wrong. We're not going to compete with them on that. We're not going to compete with a Central Asian republic on who can turn a screw into a circuit board more cheaply. It's not going to happen. They're always going to be able to do it more cheaply. So how can we add the value to allow these businesses to grow? It's educating our kids. It's ensuring that we have adequate infrastructure to allow these businesses to grow, and the research and development piece. And a lot of times the pride and joy of Minnesota in that has been the University of Minnesota with our medical device industry. It's just one example, but only one.
Thank you. Alice, same question?
Yes, I think it's been fairly clear, as John said, that the 2 things state government does in this area is the best education system we can, from early childhood to higher ed, but specifically at the higher ed level, that research and development that turns into businesses all over the state, and we think the University of Minnesota does a good job of that. The other is infrastructure, and that's where I spend most of my time. And when I write the bonding bill, on every single line, what I'm always asking myself is what infrastructure has to be in place in order for the economy to thrive, in order for us to be economically competitive. And that differs all over the state. The interesting thing is how the small towns are rethinking how they rebuild their local economy. They used to shape it around the family farm, and then the family farm is no more. I think we've got one farmer left in the legislature. They used to base it on Main Street businesses, and Main Street businesses disappeared because the big box store outside of town was drawing all the business. And so the creative towns around the state said, how do we rebuild our local economy? And the interesting thing is they rebuilt it around things that critics of the bonding bill often refer to as wants, not needs: arts and culture, natural resources, parks and trails, historical sites, museums, because that's what draws people to their area. It's what keeps young people in their area. And so there are creative ways, I think, all over the state of Minnesota that people are doing that.
Thank you. John Heyer, what is your plan to save private sector jobs in Minnesota?
Well, I agree, the higher ed piece is important. However, we also need to educate people in trades and crafts as well. Sometimes we focus on the technology parts of education in terms of business. And I know of a lot of college graduates that are working at Target, you know, and that's a problem. But if we can train people to do skilled things such as plumbers, carpenters, things like that, I think that's a really important piece of the education system. And we need to support that and the training in that area. The other aspect is we need to provide tax incentives for people starting businesses. We need to open the doors to business a bit in our state. We make it difficult. The way that you incorporate in Minnesota is rather difficult. I had a band for a number of years that was an S Corp, and I know how much paperwork I had to fill out to become incorporated. And that's an issue within Minnesota that needs to be fixed. And we need to support people with tax breaks and tax credits for hiring people that need jobs. We need to really boost the business in that way.
Thank you. Liz?
Education, but not education as usual, because it stinks. I'll tell you, it stinks. I'm a school teacher, and 5 years ago I began working on the east side of St. Paul for a nonprofit that was helping to breach the gap because we had 9 schools that were going to close because they were failing No Child Left Behind. All right? Since 1965, we have been reauthorizing the Elementary and Secondary Act, No Child Left Behind, the current Common Core initiative that's going on in our state. And we have been using methodologies that for 50 years. If they were gonna work, then we'd see our trajectory going up, right? In special education, we would not continue doing this. We would allow teachers, parents, and a team to create innovative solutions, to try something new and something different. Instead, since 1974, when we changed our state constitution, we eliminated some of the choices that were available to parents and local communities, and we have since increasingly penalized innovative home daycare providers. We've taken away their independence to create quality education decisions. We have penalized and not even considered, we've refused to consider vouchers, which really are effective in several other states. And we have reduced and sought to penalize parochial schools that do a better job than we do at a lower level. So if you want to improve business in the state, yes, improve education, but also reduce some of the regulations that are harming our schools, harming our teachers, harming our businesses, driving them out of state, and harming parents like myself who want something better for their kids and to run a business.
Thank you, Liz. The next question, we'll start with John Heyer. What will you do to change individual tax rates, since we have the 4th highest state tax rate and the 3rd highest tax rate for corporations?
It's strange that in Minnesota we penalize success. We want to tax the people who are successful with businesses. We want to tax the people who are income-wise successful at a much greater rate than everybody else, figuring that they can afford it. They owe us. The problem in that exists when you have a business and you ratchet the tax rate up, they can move. They can move their headquarters to states that don't have the taxes. We've seen that happen in the last year. They can close their doors saying, we can't do that. In our district alone, there's a number of businesses that have shut down. They can't afford to stay in business. The individuals, people see their tax rate go up and they step out of the workforce. Suddenly, where do you go to get the money that those people are putting into the government? You can move to Florida, Texas. Texas doesn't have state income tax, strangely enough. So you can retire, go to Texas, then you don't have to pay anything. In Minnesota, we want to stick it to the people that are successful. And that's troubling. We need to embrace those people and get their money working in our economy.
Thank you, John. John Lesh.
The answer, in short, is nothing. Because that statement, the third highest corporate tax and the fourth highest income tax, is a fallacy. When you look at taxes overall, what people pay in this state, we're right about at the middle. We're 23rd out of 50. This idea you can say, well, you got the highest tax rate. Well, that doesn't matter if nobody pays it. If the 2010 GAO study that said that very few corporations, General Electric which paid zero income taxes in 2011, General Electric had the highest tax rate ever in the nation of any industrialized country. Does it matter if they don't pay it? No, it doesn't matter at all. And when you are a very wealthy person that has all these special tax breaks to apply to your business and you don't pay that high tax rate, it doesn't matter either. We have 19 Fortune 500 companies, more than any other state per capita in the nation. Do you think they're here because we have the third highest corporate tax rate and the fourth highest income tax rate? They're here because of the homegrown talent. They're here because the tax revenues that we pay, which by the way are in the middle, go towards cultivating our educated students that in turn go on and build their businesses here from the ground up, which is why we have all those companies.
Thank you. The same question to Liz. What will you do to change individual tax rates, since we have the fourth highest state tax rate and the third highest rate for corporations?
I'm really a fan of fair taxes. There are other options that would be good solutions as well. Some people like flat taxes. Other people would just prefer to eliminate some of the loopholes that John spoke about. I believe that we need to reduce some of the regulations. I've heard tax accountants say that you could get a different answer from 3 different tax accountants because our regulatory burden is so complex. And I've heard family members say, you know, please reduce this, please reduce this, please reduce this. It's costing us a lot of money. I've tried to find out what the burden is for just even having all these regulations regarding taxes, is including lost income and just the cost of trying to enforce them. And I couldn't find that in our state, but it says that it's trillions and trillions of dollars federally annually. So this is something that we really need to do. I also would say that that again, it goes back to education. We are not producing homegrown talent like we used to. I recently at a international festival was just asking kids simple math questions and they could not answer them. And this is a flaw in our education system, and it's a result of, again, having too many regulations that are stifling teachers, stifling businesses, and stifling parents. We are not doing our job.
Thank you, Liz. Alice?
I'm reminded of the article from the last 2 days about Wells Fargo. And I think if I remember that article, the CEO of Wells Fargo is paid 437 times what his employees who are doing all the work are getting. And that one brave employee made that wonderful statement about if you used your profits and divided that among your employees, give them all a $10,000 raise, and he copied all of the employees, 300,000 employees in Wells Fargo. It was a great news story. I don't think we're punishing the CEO of Wells Fargo or any of the Fortune 500 companies when we structure our taxes the way we have. we are assuming that they have come here because of our investment in education, because of our investment in infrastructure. It is because of those investments they have thrived. And that's sort of paying your fair share. So I always prefer a progressive tax system where you pay your fair share of what you have profited from. I would always de-emphasize a dependence on property taxes, and very often what has happened is if we don't deal with income taxes, if we lower them, or certainly if we don't do what we did the last 2 years, the burden falls on local government and they have only one tax to turn to. And so that's an argument, I think, for keeping a strong dependence on a progressive income tax as opposed to depending on the property tax.
Okay, new question. We'll start with Liz. What is your stance on the current status of campaign finance? Should it change? If so, how?
Well, my beautiful husband George is a lifetime blue-collar DFL state employee. And so we have, along with our children, many wonderful, rigorous discussions. We are both in agreement that there needs to be a reduction in the big government as well as big union or big corporate spending. So I do believe that there needs to be reform. It needs to be equal though, because quite frankly, in some ways, unions have just become another form of big money and big government.
Thank you, Liz. Alice.
That was specifically campaign finance.
Yep.
Was the
What
name?
is your stance on the current status of campaign finance? Should it change? If so, how?
I think we've been fortunate in Minnesota. We are different from most other states. John Marty took us to the forefront of reform on that issue a long time ago. We haven't reversed most of that, and as a result, we really do still lead most states in terms of keeping some control over big money and looking for tools that suggest that the average person can have an impact as they contribute through the PCR form and others. So I think we certainly can continue to always be concerned about transparency in contributions. I think we have, at my level, I have to be very clear about where my sources of revenue come from. There are some of these the larger groups that come in from out of state who don't have to make clear where their money comes from. That lack of transparency, I think, hasn't been helpful. Again, there's some of that we can do at the state level, but so much of that I think we're going to have to also depend on the federal government.
Thank you, Alice. John Heyer.
I agree with Alice on that. That we do a good job of controlling campaign finance for the most part in Minnesota. We have the public campaign finance laws, we have the PCR, and it allows somebody who's a non-incumbent to actually be able to raise money and be able to run a race in a campaign, which is a good thing. However, one of the things that I think is really important to control, in particular at the congressional level, is PAC money coming into the state. We need to have some sort of a cap on PAC contributions to campaigns because some races get way out of control, as anyone who's watched a TV program recently probably knows, at the state level. So we need to perhaps take a look at that.
Thank you, John. John Lesh.
I don't think it's any coincidence that Minnesota, that has one of the most progressive campaign finance systems in the state, also has one of the highest voter participation rate in the nation. My family and I were recently out in Washington, D.C., and we ran into a member of Congress who told me that his caucus expects him to spend 30 hours a week on the phone, dialing for dollars, and another 10 hours a week holding events at various fundraisers. And my jaw dropped, and I said, "Are you serious?" And he told me, "Yeah, absolutely, dead serious. That's what they expect, how much time I need to be spending raising money." I feel incredibly lucky that I don't have to do that. There are legislators I know in other states who don't have to spend that much time, but nonetheless they have to spend a lot of time. Let's not kid ourselves. A good campaign finance system is a system that is generally anti-incumbent. It should be, because the resources are always going to flow to incumbency. So as long as those PAC dollars that were talked about, whether it's union dollars or corporate contributions, are flowing, they're going to flow to incumbents. You need to give the challengers a fair shot. And that means a fair campaign finance system, which was cut a few years ago. We finally brought it back, thank God. But it's very important for the health of our republic to have that in place.
Thank you. Okay, the next question, we'll switch gears. We'll start with John Lesh. What is your position on allowing or preventing individuals with domestic violence convictions to be able to own guns?
With a conviction, you are not allowed to have a handgun. It depends on if you're talking about rifles or handguns. If you get a domestic violence conviction, you cannot have a handgun. I'm proud to say this past legislative session, we passed a law also enabling the restriction of possession of handguns even prior to conviction. Now, there may potentially be some constitutional questions about that, but we dealt with that adequately, I think, in the legislation to ensure that when victims of domestic violence are at their highest level of risk, it's immediately after that first assault that goes reported. And if the abuser still has access to that firearm, there is a major issue with how justice is served. As a domestic violence prosecutor, I can tell this. Even if the gun is not used, the simple knowledge that he has a gun and he's threatened my life causes major problems to achieve justice in the criminal justice system. So I'm very proud to say that we were able to pass that. I think it's an appropriate balance that we've struck between the constitutional right to own and carry a gun, as well as creating safety for victims of domestic violence.
Thank you. John Heyer.
Can you read the question again, please?
What is your position on allowing or preventing individuals with domestic violence convictions to be able to own guns?
It's very simple. If you've been convicted, you cannot get a carry permit, period. It just can't, it's not allowed by any sheriff that I know of. I do believe you have to make a distinction again, like John Lesh said, between handguns and hunting rifles and things. We do have an outdoor culture, and if they own a shotgun to go duck hunting, that's a little different than owning a handgun. But the people who own and carry handguns, if they have a conviction on their record for domestic abuse, they're not going to get a carry permit. It's just not going to happen in Minnesota.
Thank you. Alice.
The interesting thing about this question is, you know the incredible controversy about the whole discussion of gun control generally. This issue, as John said, the bill that was before us this year, it was a bipartisan, non-controversial discussion. I mean, I think that's the nature of the question. That one's a clear one. And I think it showed in the committee hearings and the vote on the floor, in the speeches about this, that this was one that really brought everyone together because it's so clear what we ought to be doing.
Very good. Thank you. Liz.
I'm going to have a different perspective. For 20 years, I was a victim of domestic violence. My children and I were able to leave my former husband, who was a troubled man, who truly loved us but was unable to resolve his own demons. That being said, during the course of those 20 years, he did what many batterers do, and that's that he tried to play the victim in order to play the system. That, unfortunately, is not an uncommon scenario, as you can read about with Michelle McDonald in the various cases she's representing. So you have the potential of harming and convicting and taking away the rights of people who did not commit a crime. That is something that even as a domestic violence victim and survivor and current advocate for now the last 15 years, I would not have voted in favor of that bill. Instead, I would look at finding other ways of being able to ensure domestic tranquility by teaching our children better and by having other systems. Our police officers can simply cannot safeguard our people, and this law does not change people who are mentally ill and people who are violent and will not respect this law in the first place.
Thank you, Liz. Okay, our next question, what is your stance on Second Amendment rights? And we'll start with Alice Hausman.
I think there's one thing that separates us from many other countries on the statistics around gun violence. We are at the top, I think. A year ago, I had all of these statistics at the top of my mind. They have sort of faded over time. Are we more? Do we have more mental illness? Are people more angry in this country? What is the issue? Why are we outliers in the world on gun violence? And I believe it is the Second Amendment, and it's how we have interpreted that in such a way that we can't even have a thoughtful discussion after multiple shootings in schools. This country can't have a thoughtful debate about it. Most people just won't go there. And I've sometimes thought we should put I have actually the Second Amendment in my office on a big poster board. I blew it up, and I held it up for people to look at and read those words over and over. And what are those words and what do they mean? So that big poster is still in my office, but I've sometimes thought it is our interpretation of what those words mean that have just got us in a hold that doesn't allow conversation, doesn't allow reasonable limits.
Thank you, Alice. Liz.
Again, I'm the ex-wife of an Army soldier. I've had 3 sons who have served overseas. One recently returned from Afghanistan. And I'm going to say to you, guns are not the problem. People are. Since 1974, when we changed our state constitution, we have not been doing a good job of instilling a culture that has morals and is teaching and doing a good job of character education. Our federal and our state and our local governments have destabilized families, which are the place where we can, and by having stable families, you have more stable individuals. I was, until recently, a licensed EBD teacher. So again, I'm going to say guns are not the problem. It is the attitude and the culture that we have instilled. And by looking back and re-evaluating our state constitution and the changes that we've made since 1974, and our federal constitution, some of the programs that we've had that have destabilized families, increased dependencies, and caused us to not be accountable for our own personal decisions. We can change a culture, but we have to change people, not just take away their guns. And I'm a pacifist.
Thank you, Liz. John Lesh.
I'll echo Alice in saying this is one of those issues, one of 3 issues that when someone gets elected to the legislature, you're never going to change their mind on it, is the topic of guns. Because of my position, representing an urban district, I have a record on gun control that I would say is pretty strong, but I'm a gun owner. I'm a military member. I know how to shoot a gun. I know how to operate around guns. That said, once upon a time in this state, we had a proper balance to this question, which is fundamentally a cultural question between urban and rural lifestyles about how you handle guns, how you deal with things around guns. In 2003, when they said everyone ought to be able to carry a gun anywhere because it's just not fair to change things in the city, as if you're up on the Iron Range or in western Minnesota, we apply the law the same everywhere. So now you've got people with carry permits, like at Como Park, Como Lake on Monday, where he thinks someone steals his wife's purse and it'd be a good idea to squeeze off a couple of rounds of a .40 caliber Smith & Wesson as the car is driving away. That is the type of problem you reach when you think we're going to apply liberal carry laws across the state without regard to cultural and geographical differences. It has caused multiple problems in our state, and it needs to be looked at. In general, though, yes, Second Amendment, I support it. I support the wording as it's stated.
Thank you, John. John Heyer?
I support the Second Amendment and the entire Constitution for that matter. Everyone should have the right to keep and bear arms unless there are extenuating circumstances that say that they can't. And I stand by that. You look at the states that are the most restrictive with issuing gun permits, the cities, New York, Chicago, they have the highest gun violence. You can't get a gun there, but yet they have the most gun murders. Funny how that works. Only the bad guys have the guns. The case that John Lesh was mentioning at Como Park, that young man was a poster child for not paying attention in his carry permit class, apparently. But we maybe need a little tougher, a little more stringent carry permit classes than what we're doing right now. I think 4 hours maybe doesn't tell you everything you need to know about using a gun. Certainly, I would say no. And I believe that people do have the right to carry them. I am not a gun owner. I don't have a carry permit. But if I felt that I was in some danger, I certainly would not be averse to taking a carry permit class and becoming a gun owner.
Thank you, John. We are unfortunately out of time, so we will start with closing remarks, and we'll start our closing remarks with Alice Hausman.
Again, thank you to the audience for your attendance and attention, and to the League for sponsoring this. The most important thing happens in November, and that is we all have to go to the polls. In a representative democracy, it's hard work to be a responsible voter. You've got to do the research, you've got to try to figure out who are these people, what do they stand for, do they reflect my values, what will the state be should they be in a position of governing. That's hard work, but it matters. The nature of government can change very quickly if good people refuse to run for office because it's become such messy business. So we hope that there continue to be good candidates and informed voters. Last night I had a wonderful visit at Sienna Green in Roseville for a couple of hours with new citizens who take that right very seriously. And they were there, they had done some research before to find out a little bit about me, but they're going to go to the polls to vote. They understand the privilege that it is. I should tell you that tonight the League of Women Voters is having an event at the University Club where they're honoring one of our Roseville residents, Judy Stuffman, who is receiving the National Secretaries of State Medallion Award for her outstanding leadership with voter registration at naturalization ceremonies since 1997. So while we're debating, the League is having another wonderful event at the University Club where one of our Roseville residents is being honored, and I just wanted to call attention to that tonight.
Thank you, Alice. John Heyer.
Thank you for putting the debate on, and thank you for everybody who came out tonight. I really appreciate that, and the fact that we have a full room. It's great. Exercising your right to vote is a very important thing in our state, in our nation. We are blessed with that opportunity to be able to, in a civil manner, discuss issues and debate important things, and then go vote. That's an important thing. I represent maybe a little bit of a change from the way things have been, and I think that's good. It's good to have choice. In many countries, you don't get a choice. In many countries, you are stuck with whoever is put on the ballot. They are there, and you vote for them. And I'm thankful for the opportunity to be able to run. It's a blessing to truly be able to get out, meet the people, find out what their issues are, and that is important to me. In my church work, that was a lot of what we did. We talked with the people, we heard their stories, and that's what I do now. And it's great. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Liz Paulson.
To me, running for office was just an extrapolation of being a teacher. You care and you take care of your community. You educate yourself. You educate the people around you. You work as a team, and you try new and different methods to achieve an accountable goal. Now, I'm a student of history, and our founding fathers didn't envision the system where, pardon me, John, you could stay in government for this long and be a lifelong politician and not really have to go out and meet your constituents on the other side of your house district. And that's nothing personal, you're a pretty busy guy. I admire some of the things that John has done, but I really don't admire some of the things he's done, like voting to force unionization of home daycare providers without even having the due process that any good union vote would have. They disallowed 50% of the licensed home daycare providers from even voting. It's now a Supreme Court issue. I would not have voted for the big money spending on Senate district bills while our roads weren't being repaired, and quite frankly, some of our people are having a hard time getting to work. I went and voted for light rail, which has been shown across the nation to be an ineffective way of doing business and transporting people. So I've been talking to the people in our House district, and they wanted a different choice. They wanted reduced regulations. They wanted more freedom. They want school choice, and they don't want any more excuses about how we're supposedly doing so great when, quite frankly, our schools are failing and our businesses are leaving. So it's time for a change. I'd like to be your new team member.
Thank you, Liz. John Lesh.
Thanks. Before I close, I'd like folks to think about one thing with respect to education funding. During the Arnie Carlson years, the state of Minnesota spent 5.7% of its GDP on education. 5.7% of its GDP. Here comes Tim Pawlenty, we're down to 4.9% of our state GDP. The Mark Dayton administration, we're down to 4.5% of our state GDP that we spend on education. Okay, think about those numbers the next time someone tells you we're throwing a lot of money down the black hole of educating our students. Absolutely, costs are rising, but relative to our economy, our commitment to investing in our kids is dropping. It's not rising. That said, I want to thank Ms. Paulson for stepping out and running this year. I think it takes a lot of guts to put yourself out there. It absolutely does, and she and I have some different ideas about the direction that we want to go, but this is, I think, the first debate I've had in quite a few years. I mean, maybe 10 years, because no one wanted to debate, okay? And Liz comes out, which I really do appreciate, and I know that there are some people in my district she would represent very well. So I just want to close by saying thank you for being out here, and hopefully we can have a few more interactions to get people to turn out and vote this year. Ms. Paulson, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
We
you,
will have some
John.
good synergistic solutions.
Okay, in closing, I just want to say thank you to the League of Women Voters St. Paul for hosting this candidate forum. Thank you to the library staff, and thank you to the video team. Thank you very much.